This has never been a story about escaping the circus. It's a story of how do you save yourself and find peace even in a world without meaning. When you can't do the things you wanted to do, be who you wanted to be, how do you cope? With this episode showing us what happens when you can accept this and when you can't. So rather than fighting each other or crumbling back into themselves, they do what they have been doing all season, leaning on one another, with Gangle being the one to step up and say the hard thing, that none of this really matters. So they have to rely on one another, which floors Jax, as he is so used to being the one to preach nihilism, and having Gangle actually agree with him with a better response fully breaks their usual dynamic. So instead, they need to come together, as they need each other now more than ever. Despite everything and having every reason to, they do not crumble. God's an idiot and Jax did some panic attack induced shit, but they talk, he listens, and Pomni suggests they all embrace Buddhism.
Precisely. Bye.